Andy Staples covers college football for On 3 Sports, our good buddy, back with us. Let's get the conference moves, potential conference moves, realignment, ACC out of the way first. What is the latest as we head into week 1 of the season?
Well, the ACC was supposed to have a conference call on Monday among its presidents to decide, further discuss potentially adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU. And that has been postponed because of what happened in Chapel Hill. And so they have not rescheduled that yet. We're still waiting. This still makes no sense to me why they would add these guys from a practical sense, I get the finances of it. SMU wants to take no money. Stanford and Cal are given a heavy discount. So you can use some of that money to make Florida State and Clemson happy, I guess. But they're still not going to be happy because they still won't make as much as SEC or Big Ten schools. So they're still probably going to try to leave. So it doesn't make much sense to me other than you're backfilling in case they do leave and you're making sure that ESPN can't cut what they pay you. That's all I can think that makes it make sense.
But if Cal and Stanford and SMU don't join the ACC, then what?
Then I still think that if Cal and Stanford don't wind up in the ACC, there's a way for Cal, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State to use all of the trademarks, branding of the Pac-12, the NCAA tournament unions, which are worth real money that the Pac-12 is owed, and perhaps they merge with another conference, not take schools from another conference, because then those schools would have to pay buyouts or exit fees, but merge with another conference, say the Mountain West, and use all the Pac branding. I mean, you could do that and become the Pac-16, and you'd have a conference, and there you go. And you let the Mountain West people run it because they're better at running a conference than the Pac-12 people are. But that's something you could do. Or if you wanted, you could just hang as those 4 teams for a couple of years. You really could. They'll let them do that because of what's happened, and then figure it out. It would be a hell of a 3-game conference schedule.
But can you still get an automatic berth if you win the Pac-12? Like what constitutes the Pac-12, the language that allows you to be an automatic qualifier?
That would have to be determined by the college football playoff, by all the commissioners that run it. Now, for the basketball tournament, you'd need 5. You'd have to figure out a way to add a 5th school to get an automatic bid into the basketball tournament. But for the football one, my guess is they'd be like, we're not giving you an automatic bid if you only have 4 teams.
How many teams can win the national title?
Oh, I'd say there's probably about 4 or 5.
How many could go to the national title game?
Well, that's a different question, because we saw TCU do it last year. So it kind of depends on how you get matched up in that first semifinal. But let's make the list right now. I'd say Georgia. I'd say Ohio State, Michigan. I actually think Penn State would be in that group of could go to the national title game, because I think Penn State could potentially win the Big Ten this year. I think Alabama could. Absolutely. We will see about the Big 12 teams. Texas is talented enough, but again, I need to see them win games they're supposed to win. If somebody were to come out of the Pac-12 12-1, whether that's USC, Washington, Oregon, then maybe you could see them doing it. But in terms of just straight up winning it, I think I'd probably limit it to Georgia, Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, maybe LSU.
Ohio State?
Did I say Ohio State? I think I did. Yeah, they're certainly talented enough. The question is, I actually picked Penn State to make the playoff and Michigan and Ohio State to miss it. So we'll see how that goes.
But people have talked about conference realignments ruining college football, NILs ruining, the transfer portals ruining. Wasn't college football already ruined from the standpoint of it's almost formulaic. It feels like it's Alabama. It's Georgia. It's Ohio State. You throw Clemson in there. Sometimes you have an outlier there, but we sort of know what's going to happen at the end of the season, or at least we know that the schools. We know that Tom Cruise doesn't die in Mission Impossible, but we do know that his life is in peril a couple of times. It feels like that's what it is for college football.
It is, and that's what I laugh about when all the people say, well, NIL is ruining. No, it's not. The rules they had before made college football the least competitive of all the major American sports.
Yeah.
Think about how hard it is to be less competitive than Major League Baseball, given Major League Baseball's rules. So you've managed to do that. So the rules before were the problem. Like all this NIL stuff that people say is ruining college football. The number one defensive line prospect in America just committed to Missouri because of NIL. He's not going to Missouri if there's no NIL.
If I gave you, okay, you could have Caleb Williams or the field for the Heisman, or Georgia versus the field for the national title.
So I take the field for the Heisman and Georgia for the national title. And the only reason I'm taking the field for the Heisman is I feel like we as a group of voters just find ways to tear down the repeat winners or the potential repeat winners. Because Caleb Williams, there's a very good chance he will be the best player in college football this year. But we've seen how hard it is to repeat as a Heisman winner. I feel like if anybody can, it's him, because he's just very special. You saw it the other night when he drops the snap and then his instincts are incredible. And I'm a little worried their defense hasn't got much better, and he's going to have to be Superman down the stretch because they're playing a very tough schedule in the back half of the season. So that one there, Georgia, I feel like even though that nobody's three-peated since 1936, Georgia has a better roster than everybody. And you can say what you want about them not playing a tough schedule. They were supposed to play Oklahoma. The SEC's like, nah, we can't have the return game be a conference game and this be non-conference. So they're not playing Oklahoma this year. But they're still just better on both lines of scrimmage than everybody else. And if there's any universal truth in football, the team with the better big people wins. And Georgia has much better big people.
We're talking to Andy Staples, covers college football for On3 Sports. But why don't other schools replicate what Alabama and Georgia do? LSU's got money. Mm-hmm. Tennessee's got money. I mean, you can look at it. USC's got money. But why is Georgia now become the new Alabama?
Because there are so few good big people. That's the scarcest resource in college football is ready-made defensive linemen, ready-made offensive linemen. They were all going to Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson before. Georgia started as soon as Kirby Smart got to Georgia, he started shearing some of those off of each of those schools. And you go to the class of 2020, there's a group of 4 players that considered Georgia and Alabama, had Georgia and Alabama in their finalists. One of them is Georgia's current starting center. One of them is Darnell Washington, who was a tight end that is in the NFL now. Jalen Carter's another one. He's with the Eagles now. If you put those players on Alabama's roster last year, Alabama wins the national title in the same way Georgia does. But that's what Kirby Smart has done, is managed to find guys and beat Alabama for those guys. LSU, Tennessee, they have not been able to beat Alabama for those guys. Like Nick Saban still had the number 1 recruiting class in the country in the class of 2023. So,
but how are they beating them, Andy?
How are they beating them on the field?
No. Okay. You're getting them. What are you giving them? What's your enticement? Is it just money?
Well, it's not just that. You can say, everybody did the duffel bag, but it doesn't matter anymore. What they can offer, and Ohio State can offer this too, and Clemson's been able to offer this of late, is we make better draft picks than everybody else.
Okay.
Look at how many first-round draft picks Georgia's produced. And the thing is, you can actually get somebody at a discount in the NIL world when you can say, you might come out of here as a first-round draft pick, and here's 5 guys who just did.
Okay. Is there going to be a breakout team? Who's going to be TCU this year?
That's a great question. I've said Penn State, and now Penn State and TCU, Penn State this year, TCU last year, are different animals because Penn State has a bunch of elite NFL talent. Olu Fashanu, who's probably the first offensive tackle off the board. Abdul Carter and Chop Robinson are very high round NFL draft picks, one this year and one next year. So it's a little bit different, but it feels like they have not been in that mix. So I'm going to put them in there. As far as a TCU, that's so hard to predict because that TCU team was so charmed. 8 one-score games. That Baylor game where they ran the field goal team on, and there's so many times where it shouldn't have happened for them, and then it did. So that's the one. Now, I will give you one out of the Big 12 that I think is very interesting, and that's Kansas State. They won the league last year, bringing back a lot. 4 starting offensive linemen are back. Cooper Beebe is the best interior offensive lineman in the country, probably. Again, the teams with the best big people And that's so if they were to come out of the Big 12, they could be pretty interesting.
Great to talk to you again, Andy. We'll catch up during the season. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Andy Staples covers college football for On3 Sports.